Every hero has an origin story. But Batman's origin is not about becoming a hero. It's about a child who witnessed horror and decided to live inside that horror forever. This is not a story about justice. This is a story about a man who refuses to heal. Welcome to the darkest psychological breakdown of the Dark Knight. Let's dive into why Batman never heals and why he never wanted to. Picture this. A young boy, only 8 years old, walks out of a theater with his parents. It's a beautiful night in Gotham City. Thomas and Martha Wayne are smiling, holding their son's hands. They've just watched a movie together. It's a rare moment of peace for Gotham's most prominent family. Then, in one moment, everything changes. A desperate man steps out of the shadows. A demand for money. A moment of resistance. A gunshot. 2 gunshots. Blood on the pavement. Pearls scattering across concrete. The boy watches his parents die right in front of him. He hears his mother's last breath. He sees his father's eyes go empty. That boy is Bruce Wayne. And that night in Crime Alley becomes the night that never ends. Most people would call this trauma. Psychologists would call it a defining traumatic event that requires years of therapy and processing. Clinical studies show that children who witness parental death, especially violent death, have a 70% chance of developing severe post-traumatic stress disorder. They need immediate intervention. They need cognitive behavioral therapy. They need a support system that helps them understand that what happened was not their fault. But Bruce Wayne calls it something else. He calls it purpose. He calls it destiny. He calls it the moment he was born. And here's where the psychological breakdown begins. According to trauma psychology, the human mind has specific ways of dealing with unbearable events. Fight, flight, or freeze. In that moment, young Bruce froze. He couldn't save his parents. He couldn't run. He couldn't fight. He was powerless. And that powerlessness burned itself into his neural pathways. It became the core wound around which his entire personality would form. Developmental psychology tells us that our childhood experiences, especially traumatic ones, shape our adult identity. For most people, therapy helps reprocess these memories. It helps create new neural pathways. It helps the brain understand that the threat is over. But Bruce Wayne never gave himself that chance. He had all the resources in the world. He was a billionaire heir with access to the best mental health patterns and support systems money could buy. Wayne Enterprises could have hired an entire team of trauma specialists. He could have gone to Switzerland, to Vienna, to anywhere in the world for treatment. But he chose differently. He chose to internalize the trauma. He chose to let it consume him. He chose to become it. In Jungian psychology, Carl Jung talks about the shadow self, the dark parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. The parts we hide from the world and sometimes from ourselves. But Batman does the opposite. He doesn't hide his shadow. He becomes the shadow. He wears it as a costume. He makes it his identity. He takes everything that terrifies him and transforms it into his weapon. Think about this for a moment. Bruce Wayne spends years training his body and mind. He disappears from Gotham for nearly a decade. He learns from the best martial artists in the world. He studies criminology, forensics, chemistry, and engineering. He masters disguise and interrogation. He builds weapons and technology that don't exist anywhere else. All of this takes discipline, focus, and intelligence. This is not the behavior of someone broken by grief. This is calculated. This is intentional. This is methodical. This is a man who has made a choice. And that choice is to never move on. He's not training to overcome his trauma. He's training to weaponize it. In depth psychology, we understand that unresolved trauma doesn't just fade away. It doesn't diminish with time. It shapes personality. It influences every decision, every relationship, every moment of every day. It becomes the lens through which we see the world. For Bruce Wayne, that lens is permanent darkness. He doesn't see Gotham as a city that can be saved. He sees it as Crime Alley on an infinite loop. Every criminal is Joe Chill, the man who pulled the trigger. Every victim is his parents. Every dark alley is that alley. Every night is that night. He's not patrolling Gotham. He's patrolling his own memory, trying desperately to change an outcome that's already written in blood. Let's talk about what healing actually means from a psychological perspective. Healing means acceptance. It means acknowledging what happened, feeling the pain fully, and gradually letting it go. It means building a new identity that isn't defined by the worst moment of your life. It means finding meaning beyond the trauma. It means reconnecting with joy, with love, with hope. Bruce Wayne rejects all of this. He doesn't want acceptance because acceptance feels like forgetting. He doesn't want to let go because letting go feels like abandoning his parents. He doesn't want a new identity because Bruce Wayne the happy child died that night, and he refuses to build anything new on those ashes. He wants revenge. Not just against the man who pulled the trigger but against crime itself. Against chaos. Against the randomness of the universe. Against death. Against fate. Against God if necessary. This is where behavioral psychology reveals something deeply disturbing. Batman is not fighting crime. He's fighting grief. And grief is an enemy you can never defeat. Grief is not a villain you can punch into submission. It's not a problem you can solve with technology or intelligence. It's a fundamental part of the human experience. But Batman refuses to accept this. So the fight never ends. And he doesn't want it to end. Because the day the fight ends is the day he has to sit with himself. And that terrifies him more than any villain ever could. Carl Jung introduced the concept of archetypes, universal symbols and patterns that exist in the collective unconscious mind. The hero archetype is someone who faces trials, overcomes darkness and emerges transformed and whole. The hero brings light back to their community. But Batman never transforms. He never emerges. He's stuck. Frozen in time like a photograph. He's what Jungian analysis would call a wounded healer who never actually heals. He helps others, saves lives, stops villains, protects the innocent. But he can never save himself. Because saving himself means letting go of Bruce Wayne, the terrified 8-year-old boy crying over his dead parents. And he will never let that boy rest. That boy is the only thing that feels real to him anymore. That boy's pain is the only thing that makes him feel alive. Here's the controversial truth that makes people uncomfortable. Bruce Wayne could have healed. He absolutely could have. He had Alfred Pennyworth, the most loyal father figure anyone could ask for. A man who loved him unconditionally. Alfred didn't just work for the Waynes. He loved them as family. And when Thomas and Martha died, Alfred stayed. He raised Bruce. He tried to guide him toward a healthy life. Alfred begged him not to go down this path. Alfred saw the darkness growing in young Bruce and tried everything to pull him back toward the light. He offered wisdom, compassion, and guidance. He was there every single day with patience and love. But Bruce pushed him away emotionally. He kept Alfred at arm's length, using him as support for Batman, as technical assistance, as cover, but never allowing him to heal Bruce Wayne. Why? Because healing requires vulnerability. It requires admitting you're broken. It requires asking for help. It requires trusting someone else to see your pain and not judge you for it. And Bruce Wayne cannot afford to be broken. Batman cannot afford to be human. So he builds walls. Emotional walls thicker than the armor he wears every night. This is psychological trauma turning into psychological disorders. This is depression masked as determination. This is unprocessed grief disguised as heroism. This is a man who turned his wound into his identity and called it strength. In psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud talked about defense mechanisms. These are ways the mind protects itself from unbearable pain. Denial, repression, projection, sublimation. These are unconscious strategies we use to cope with reality when reality is too painful to face directly. Bruce Wayne uses one of the most extreme defense mechanisms in the entire psychological literature. Identification with the aggressor. He can't bring back his parents. He can't undo that night. He can't make the world safe again. So instead he becomes the thing criminals fear. He becomes violence. He becomes terror. He becomes the night itself. If he can't escape the darkness, he'll become the darkness. If he can't feel safe, he'll become the danger. This isn't heroism in any traditional psychological sense. This is survival through dissociation. Batman is Bruce Wayne's dissociative identity, a fractured piece of his psyche that takes over when the pain becomes too much. In personality analysis, we'd say that Bruce Wayne is the host identity, and Batman is the alter. The alter exists to protect the host from feelings he can't process. But over time the alter becomes stronger. The alter takes more control. Until eventually Bruce Wayne becomes the mask and Batman becomes the real person. This is what happens in the comics. Bruce even says it himself sometimes, "I'm not Batman because I wear the suit. I wear the suit because I am Batman." He's telling us that the dissociation is complete. The protective alter has taken over completely. Now let's examine his relationships through the lens of psychological patterns. Every person who gets close to Batman tries to save him. Dick Grayson, the first Robin, loses his parents in a circus accident just like Bruce lost his in an alley. But Dick processes his grief differently. He finds family in Bruce and Alfred. He finds hope. He finds a way to honor his parents by living well, not by living in pain. He becomes Nightwing and moves on. He builds healthy relationships. He finds love. He finds joy. He proves that trauma doesn't have to be permanent. Bruce sees this and feels betrayed. Not because Dick left, but because Dick proved that healing is possible. And if healing is possible, then Bruce's entire existence is a choice, not a necessity. He can't accept that. So what does he do? He brings in another Robin. And another. Jason Todd dies brutally, murdered by the Joker. And Bruce blames himself. He carries the guilt like another weight on his shoulders. But does he stop? Does he say this is too dangerous, I'm putting children at risk, I need to change my approach? No. He brings in Tim Drake. Then Damien, his own biological son. Then Stephanie Brown. Then others. He keeps surrounding himself with children who've lost something, because their pain validates his pain. Their presence allows him to play savior while never actually saving himself. This is dark psychology at its darkest. This is a man using others' trauma to avoid facing his own. And we call him a mentor. We call him a father figure. But from a psychological perspective, this is deeply unhealthy codependency. Then there's Catwoman, Selina Kyle. She's the one person who sees both Bruce and Batman clearly. She understands both sides. She doesn't judge either one. She loves him completely, unconditionally. She wants to be with him. She's willing to give up her life of crime. She's willing to meet him halfway. And Bruce wants it too. You can see it in every interaction. He loves her. He wants a life with her. He wants to wake up next to someone who knows all of him and stays anyway. But every time they get close to real commitment, every time marriage is on the table, every time happiness becomes possible, he sabotages it. He pushes her away. He chooses Gotham over her. He chooses the mission over love. Why? Because love means vulnerability. Love means opening up. Love means letting someone see the broken child inside. Love means building a future instead of living in the past. And if he lets someone heal that child, if he allows himself to be happy, Batman dies. His entire identity collapses. The mission that gives his life meaning disappears. So he chooses loneliness. He chooses the mission. He chooses trauma over love every single time. This is personality analysis showing us that Batman isn't a personality. It's a prison. And Bruce Wayne is both the prisoner and the warden. He's locked himself in and thrown away the key. And he's convinced himself that this is noble. That this is necessary. That this is what his parents would have wanted. But would they? Would Thomas and Martha Wayne want their son to spend his entire life in pain? The villain psychology in Batman's world is absolutely fascinating from a Jungian perspective. Every major villain he faces is a reflection of his shadow self, an externalized piece of his unconscious mind. Joker represents chaos, the complete randomness of the universe that killed his parents for no reason. Two-Face represents duality, the Bruce Wayne versus Batman split, the civil war happening inside him. Scarecrow represents fear itself, the terror that controls every moment of his existence. Ra's al Ghul represents extremism, what Batman could become if he took one more step into darkness. Poison Ivy represents the parts of nature and humanity he's cut himself off from. The Riddler represents his obsessive need to solve everything, to make sense of senselessness. These villains aren't just enemies in a traditional sense. They're mirrors. They're psychological projections. They're parts of his unconscious mind made flesh and given form. And he can never truly defeat them because he can never defeat the parts of himself they represent. Every time he puts Joker back in Arkham, chaos returns. Every time he stops Scarecrow, fear remains. This is Jungian psychology playing out in every punch, every battle, every victory that feels hollow. He's shadow boxing with himself. And the fight is rigged because both sides are him. Carl Jung would say that true psychological health requires integrating the shadow, accepting all parts of yourself. But Batman exists in eternal conflict with his shadow. He fights it instead of integrating it. And that's why he never finds peace. Let's address the hero psychology myth directly. Society calls Batman a hero. Comics call him a hero. Movies call him a hero. Children dress up as him for Halloween. But what is a hero from a psychological and mythological perspective? A hero sacrifices for others. A hero inspires hope. A hero makes the world objectively better. A hero completes the journey and returns transformed. Batman does save lives. He stops crimes. He prevents tragedies. But he does it from a place of compulsion, not compassion. He doesn't save Gotham because he loves Gotham. He saves it because he needs it. Gotham is his therapy. Gotham is his drug. Every criminal he stops is a failed attempt to rewrite history. Every life he saves is an attempt to save Thomas and Martha Wayne retroactively, to go back in time and undo that night. This isn't heroism in the traditional sense. This is obsessive-compulsive disorder manifesting as vigilantism. This is a man performing the same ritual every night hoping desperately for a different result. And it never comes. The definition of insanity, they say, is doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting different outcomes. Batman is functionally insane by this metric. He knows the fight never ends. He knows Gotham will never be clean. He knows that for every criminal he puts away, 2 more will rise. But he continues anyway because stopping means facing the truth. And the truth is that his parents are dead, and nothing he does will ever change that. So he runs. He fights. He hides behind the mission. And we celebrate him for it. The psychological community has debated Batman's mental state for decades in academic journals and case studies. Some psychologists diagnose him with PTSD, pointing to his hypervigilance, his nightmares, his inability to form close relationships. Others say major depressive disorder, noting his persistent feelings of emptiness and his risk-taking behavior that borders on suicidal. Some argue dissociative identity disorder, the split between Bruce Wayne and Batman. Others point to obsessive-compulsive disorder in his need for control and order. But here's what they all agree on. Batman is not mentally healthy by any clinical standard. He operates at peak physical condition but exists in psychological collapse. He's what we call a high-functioning trauma survivor. Emphasis on functioning, not on surviving. He's trapped in what psychological theory calls repetition compulsion, endlessly recreating the traumatic event hoping to master it, to control it, to finally win. But trauma doesn't work that way. You can't punch your way out of grief. You can't kick your way out of loss. You can't gadget your way out of pain. Yet Batman keeps trying. Night after night. Year after year. Decade after decade. And every morning when he returns to Wayne Manor, he's exactly where he started. No closer to peace. No closer to healing. No closer to letting go. In shadow psychology, Carl Jung believed that integrating the shadow, accepting our darkness as part of our wholeness, is essential for psychological health. Batman does the opposite. He doesn't integrate his shadow. He becomes it completely. There's no balance. No light to offset the darkness. No Bruce Wayne living a real life during the day. There's only Batman, the shadow, consuming everything else. The man doesn't have a shadow. He is the shadow. This is psychological patterns at their most destructive. This is what happens when trauma becomes identity, when pain becomes purpose, when the wound becomes the person. Bruce Wayne didn't survive that night in Crime Alley in any meaningful psychological sense. He died there with his parents. What walks around in his body is just animated grief in a cape. It's trauma given form and function. It's walking PTSD with $1 billion budget. And somehow we've convinced ourselves this is admirable. We teach children to be like Batman. Strong. Determined. Never giving up. But we never talk about the cost. We never discuss what he sacrificed to become this. His happiness. His humanity. His chance at a normal life. His ability to love and be loved. Everything that makes life worth living he gave up. And for what? For a mission that never ends. For a war he can never win. Think about Batman's famous no-kill rule. People praise it as moral superiority. They say it's what separates him from the villains. But let's examine it through rigorous character analysis and psychological theory. He won't kill because killing would be too final. Too much closure. If he killed the Joker permanently, if he eliminated his enemies once and for all, what would he do then? Who would he be? The mission would be over. And if the mission is over, he'd have to face himself. He'd have to sit alone with the grief he's been running from for 30 years. He'd have to feel everything he's been avoiding. So he doesn't kill. Not because he values life above all. But because he needs the fight to continue forever. He needs the wound to stay open. He needs the pain to persist because the pain is all he knows. Pain is his comfort zone. Pain is his home. This is psychological trauma creating a feedback loop of suffering. He suffers so he fights. The fight causes more trauma. More trauma means more fighting. Round and round it goes. A spiral that only moves downward. And everyone around him enables it. Alfred enables it by maintaining the Batcave. Gordon enables it by keeping the bat signal. The Justice League enables it by calling him when they need help. No one stages an intervention. No one says, "Bruce, you need therapy, not a cape." They all pretend this is normal. This is healthy. This is fine. But it's not fine. It's a man destroying himself slowly, night by night, calling it justice. Alfred once said about the Joker, "Some men just want to watch the world burn." But the truth about Bruce Wayne is somehow darker. He doesn't want to watch the world burn. He wants to burn with it. He doesn't want peace. Peace terrifies him. He doesn't want retirement. What would he do with himself? He doesn't want a happy ending because happy endings are for people who moved on, and he never will. In every future timeline, every alternate universe, every possible iteration across decades of comics, Batman dies fighting. That's not coincidence. That's not bad luck. That's his subconscious desire made manifest across infinite realities. He wants to die the way his parents died. Violently. Suddenly. In service of something. Because if he dies old and peaceful in his bed, it means he wasted his life. It means the trauma won. It means he suffered for nothing. But if he dies as Batman, then the trauma has meaning. Then the pain has purpose. Then his parents' death wasn't random chaos but the beginning of something important. This is the hidden mind of Bruce Wayne laid bare. This is what depth psychology reveals when we look beneath the surface. It's a death wish disguised as a mission. It's suicidal ideation wrapped in heroic rhetoric. He's not trying to save Gotham. He's trying to find a death worthy of the boy who died in Crime Alley. And that is absolutely heartbreaking. The saddest part of this entire psychological breakdown? Batman has saved thousands of lives. He's inspired other heroes. He's made Gotham measurably safer. Crime rates drop when he's active. Children sleep better knowing he's out there. He's contributed billions to charity through Wayne Enterprises. He's funded orphanages, hospitals, and schools. He's done immeasurable good for the world. But he's never saved the one person who needed it most. Himself. That 8-year-old boy is still crying in Crime Alley. Still calling for his parents. Still waiting for someone to tell him it's going to be okay. Still hoping someone will save him. But Batman can't go back there. He can't comfort that child. Because acknowledging that child means acknowledging the pain fully. And acknowledging the pain means it becomes real in a way he can't control. So he runs. He fights. He hides behind the mask and the mission. He calls it justice. He calls it duty. He calls it honoring his parents. But it's just avoidance. It's just fear. It's just a broken man refusing to look in the mirror because he knows what he'll see. A child who never grew up. A wound that never healed. A soul that never recovered. And it's easier to punch criminals than to face that truth. In character study after character study across psychology and literature, we see the same pattern. Batman is the most human superhero because he has no powers. But he's also the least human because he's abandoned his humanity entirely. He's chosen trauma over healing. Mission over meaning. Darkness over dawn. Vengeance over peace. And the truly terrifying part? We celebrate him for it. We call him strong for never seeking help. We call him dedicated for never taking a break. We call him a hero for sacrificing everything. But what if we're wrong? What if Batman is actually a cautionary tale? A warning about what happens when society glorifies pain instead of promoting healing? When we praise people for suffering instead of supporting them to recover? When we reward self-destruction and call it strength? Batman is what happens when trauma goes untreated. When grief becomes identity. When pain becomes purpose. And instead of getting him help, we gave him a cape and called him a legend. This is the truth about Batman that no one wants to admit, that makes people uncomfortable, that challenges everything we think about heroism. He's not a hero in any healthy psychological sense. He's a victim who never became a survivor. He's a wound that never closed. He's a scream that never ended. He's a man who chose to live in hell because heaven felt like a betrayal of the dead. And every night he puts on that cape, every night he jumps from rooftop to rooftop, every night he punches criminals in dark alleys, he's not fighting them. He's fighting himself. He's fighting that 8-year-old boy who couldn't save his parents. He's fighting the universe that took them away. He's fighting reality itself. And he's losing. He's been losing for 30 years. And he'll keep losing until the day he dies. Because Batman never heals. He doesn't know how. And the saddest part? He doesn't want to. The night his parents died, a part of Bruce Wayne died too. And Batman is just the ghost that refuses to move on. That's not heroism. That's tragedy. And maybe it's time we stopped celebrating it and started questioning what it says about us that we do.